You've been struggling with anxiety and depression for years. You've tried therapy, medications, lifestyle changes, meditation, exercise, dietary adjustments, and every self-help approach you can find. Some things help temporarily, but the underlying darkness and fear always seem to return, often stronger than before. Your doctors tell you it's a chemical imbalance. Your therapist suggests it's psychological patterns, and everyone around you offers well-meaning advice about thinking positively, or just getting more sleep. But deep down, you sense that something more fundamental is wrong. The anxiety doesn't feel purely mental. It's visceral, physical, like your entire body is trapped in a state of alarm. The depression doesn't feel like sadness. It feels like disconnection, like some essential part of your life force has gone offline. You start to wonder if you're broken in some irreparable way, if this is just how your brain works, or if you'll ever feel truly alive and peaceful again. What if I told you that your anxiety and depression might not be primarily mental health conditions at all? What if they're actually symptoms of physical damage to one of the most important nerves in your body? A nerve that most doctors never examine and most people have never heard of. What if the real culprit behind your suffering is damage to your vagus nerve, the master controller of your body's capacity for calm, connection, and emotional regulation? Vagus nerve damage is an epidemic hiding in plain sight, masquerading as mental illness when it's actually a physiological condition with clear biological mechanisms and, more importantly, potential pathways for healing. The vagus nerve, the longest cranial nerve in your body, stretches from your brainstem down through your neck, chest, and into your abdomen. It's the primary pathway of your parasympathetic nervous system, controlling everything from your heart rate and breathing to your digestion and immune function. But perhaps most crucially, your vagus nerve is intimately involved in emotional regulation, social connection, and your fundamental sense of safety in the world. When this nerve is damaged or severely dysfunctional, it creates a cascade of symptoms that are often misdiagnosed as purely psychiatric conditions, when they're actually manifestations of nervous system injury. Understanding vagus nerve damage requires recognizing that this isn't necessarily dramatic, acute injury like you might see with other nerves. Vagal damage often develops gradually over months or years through chronic stress, trauma, inflammation, infections, autoimmune responses, or exposure to toxins. It's more like the slow erosion of a riverbank than a sudden landslide. The damage accumulates over time until the nerve's function becomes severely compromised. The connection between vagus nerve damage and anxiety becomes clear when you understand the nerve's role in threat detection and safety signaling. A healthy vagus nerve constantly monitors your internal and external environment, sending safety signals to your brain when everything is functioning normally. These signals allow your nervous system to remain calm and alert rather than hypervigilant and reactive. When your vagus nerve is damaged, these safety signals become weak or absent entirely. Without adequate safety signaling, your brain defaults to interpreting ambiguous situations as threats. Your threat detection system becomes hyperactive, while your calming system becomes hypoactive. This creates the persistent sense of danger, the scanning for problems, the racing thoughts, and the physical tension that characterize chronic anxiety. But this isn't anxiety that can be reasoned away or managed through cognitive techniques alone, because the underlying problem is physiological. Your brain is receiving faulty information from a damaged nervous system, making it nearly impossible to feel genuinely safe no matter how logically safe your circumstances might be. The depression connection is equally profound, but more complex. Your vagus nerve plays crucial roles in what researchers call the social engagement system, your ability to connect with others, experience pleasure, feel motivated, and engage meaningfully with life. When vagal function is severely compromised, You lose access to these fundamental human capacities. This isn't the sadness or grief that we typically associate with depression. It's more like a complete absence of positive emotion, a disconnection from everything that once felt meaningful or enjoyable. People with vagus nerve damage often describe feeling like they're watching their life from behind glass, present but not really engaged, going through the motions without experiencing the emotions that should accompany human experience. The inflammatory aspects of vagus nerve damage create another pathway to both anxiety and depression. Your vagus nerve is responsible for what researchers call the inflammatory reflex, your body's ability to detect inflammation and activate anti-inflammatory responses. When this nerve is damaged, inflammation can become chronic and systemic, affecting every organ system, including your brain. Chronic inflammation in the brain doesn't just affect cognitive function. It directly impacts emotional regulation, motivation, and your capacity for experiencing positive emotions. Inflammatory chemicals called cytokines can cross the blood-brain barrier and essentially hijack your brain's emotional processing systems, creating what researchers call sickness behavior, fatigue, social withdrawal, loss of appetite, sleep disturbances, and loss of pleasure in activities. This inflammation-driven depression and anxiety often doesn't respond well to traditional psychiatric treatments because the root cause is biological rather than psychological. You're not dealing with faulty thought patterns or emotional processing. You're dealing with a brain that's been chemically altered by inflammatory processes stemming from vagus nerve dysfunction. The gut-brain connection provides another crucial piece of the vagus nerve damage puzzle. Your gut contains its own complex nervous system, sometimes called the second brain, which communicates extensively with your actual brain through the vagus nerve. When your vagus nerve is damaged, this communication system breaks down, creating both digestive dysfunction and mental health symptoms. Your gut microbiome, the trillions of bacteria living in your digestive system, depends on healthy vagal communication to maintain balance. When vagal function is compromised, harmful bacteria can proliferate while beneficial bacteria decline, creating what's called dysbiosis. These imbalanced bacteria produce toxins and inflammatory compounds that travel to your brain through the damaged vagal pathways, contributing to anxiety, depression, and cognitive dysfunction. This is why so many people with treatment-resistant anxiety and depression also struggle with digestive issues, food sensitivities, and gut problems. These aren't separate conditions. They're all manifestations of the same underlying vagus nerve damage that's disrupting communication between your gut and brain. Sleep dysfunction is both a cause and consequence of vagus nerve damage that significantly contributes to anxiety and depression. Your vagus nerve orchestrates the complex transition from wakefulness to sleep, coordinating the decrease in heart rate, blood pressure, and metabolic activity that allows for restorative sleep. When this nerve is damaged, these transitions become inefficient or incomplete. You might fall asleep due to exhaustion, but your nervous system never fully shifts into the parasympathetic states necessary for deep, restorative sleep. You spend more time in light, fragmented sleep, and less time in the deep phases that actually restore your brain and process emotional experiences. Over time, this chronic sleep dysfunction creates and perpetuates both anxiety and depression through multiple biological pathways. The social isolation that often accompanies vagus nerve damage creates another vicious cycle that worsens mental health symptoms. Your vagus nerve is heavily involved in your ability to feel safe and connected in social situations. When this nerve is damaged, social interactions become effortful and draining rather than nourishing and restorative. Many people with vagus nerve damage gradually withdraw from social connections because being around others feels overwhelming or exhausting. But social isolation further weakens vagal function while also eliminating the co-regulation opportunities that healthy relationships provide. You end up trapped in a cycle where damage leads to isolation, which worsens the damage, which increases. Isolation. The hormonal disruptions associated with vagus nerve damage contribute significantly to both anxiety and depression through multiple pathways. Your vagus nerve influences the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which controls stress hormone production. When vagal function is compromised, this system can become dysregulated, leading to either chronically elevated stress hormones or inadequate stress hormone responses. Both patterns contribute to mental health symptoms in different ways. Chronically elevated cortisol can create anxiety, insomnia, cognitive dysfunction, and eventually lead to burnout and depression. Inadequate cortisol responses can create fatigue, lack of motivation, difficulty handling normal stressors, and a sense of being overwhelmed by basic daily demands. The neurotransmitter implications of vagus nerve damage help explain why traditional psychiatric medications often provide incomplete relief or lose effectiveness over time. While medications like SSR focus on increasing serotonin availability in your brain, they don't address the underlying vagal dysfunction that may be disrupting serotonin production, transport, and receptor sensitivity. Your vagus nerve influences multiple neurotransmitter systems, including serotonin, dopamine, GABA, and acetylcholine. When this nerve is damaged, these systems can become imbalanced in ways that create both anxiety and depression. Treating the symptoms with neurotransmitter-focused medications might provide temporary relief, but it doesn't address the root cause of the dysregulation, the trauma connection to vagus. Nerve damage is particularly important because trauma is both a cause of vagal damage and a consequence of vagal dysfunction. Traumatic experiences can overwhelm and damage your vagus nerve, creating patterns of chronic nervous system dysregulation that persist long after the original events. But vagus nerve damage from other causes can also make you more susceptible to developing trauma responses to subsequent stressors. This creates a complex relationship where it becomes difficult to determine whether anxiety and depression are primarily trauma-related or primarily due to vagal damage from other causes. Often, it's both. Trauma damages the vagus nerve, which creates vulnerability to further trauma, which causes more vagal damage, creating escalating cycles of mental health deterioration. The autoimmune aspects of vagus nerve damage represent an often overlooked pathway to anxiety and depression. Various autoimmune conditions can affect vagal function directly or indirectly. Additionally, chronic stress and trauma can trigger autoimmune responses that further damage the vagus nerve, creating complex interactions between immune dysfunction and mental health symptoms. Some people develop what appears to be rapid onset anxiety and depression following infections, medical procedures, or other health events that trigger autoimmune responses affecting their vagus nerve. These cases often don't fit typical mental health patterns and may require different treatment approaches that address both the immune dysfunction and the nervous system damage. Environmental toxins represent another under-recognized cause of vagus nerve damage that can manifest as anxiety and depression. Heavy metals, pesticides, mold toxins, and other environmental contaminants can damage nerve tissue and disrupt nervous system function. People with significant toxic exposures may develop mental health symptoms that don't respond to conventional treatments because the underlying cause is toxin-induced nerve damage. The genetic and epigenetic factors in vagus nerve function help explain why some people seem more resilient to stress, while others develop anxiety and depression more easily. Some individuals are born with stronger vagal tone and more resilient nervous systems, while others may have genetic variations that make them more susceptible to vagal damage or less efficient at vagal repair. Epigenetic factors, how your genes are expressed based on environmental influences, also play crucial roles. Chronic stress, trauma, poor nutrition, And environmental toxins can all influence gene expression in ways that impair vagal function and increase vulnerability to anxiety and depression. The developmental aspects of vagus nerve damage are particularly tragic because they can set the stage for lifelong mental health struggles. Children who experience chronic stress, trauma, inconsistent caregiving, or early life medical interventions may develop compromised vagal function that persists into adulthood. These individuals may struggle with anxiety and depression from an early age and find that traditional treatments provide limited relief. Understanding the role of vagus nerve damage in anxiety and depression opens up entirely new approaches to treatment that focus on nervous system repair rather than just symptom management. Instead of only addressing neurotransmitter imbalances or psychological patterns, treatment can focus on healing the underlying nerve damage and restoring healthy vagal function. Vagus nerve rehabilitation often involves approaches that stimulate and strengthen vagal pathways while addressing the underlying causes of damage. This might include specific breathing techniques, cold exposure therapy, vocalization exercises, gentle movement practices, dietary interventions that reduce inflammation, gut healing protocols, toxin elimination, and stress management approaches that support nervous system healing. But perhaps most importantly, recognizing vagus nerve damage as a potential underlying cause provides hope for people who have struggled with treatment-resistant anxiety and depression. Instead of being told that they have chronic mental illness that requires lifelong management, they can understand that they may have a nervous system injury that has potential for healing and recovery. The breathwork approaches for vagus nerve rehabilitation involve specific patterns that stimulate and strengthen vagal pathways over time. This isn't just relaxation breathing. It's targeted therapy designed to restore healthy nervous system function. Techniques like the physiological sigh, extended exhale breathing, and diaphragmatic breathing can gradually improve vagal tone when practiced consistently. Cold exposure therapy has shown remarkable promise for vagus nerve rehabilitation because it provides controlled stressors that help strengthen the nerve's adaptive capacity. Regular cold exposure through cold showers, ice baths, or cold water swimming can gradually improve vagal function while also supporting overall nervous system resilience. Nutritional approaches to vagus nerve healing focus on reducing inflammation, supporting nerve repair, and optimizing gut health. Anti-inflammatory diets, specific nutrients that support nerve function, probiotics that restore healthy gut bacteria, and elimination of foods that trigger inflammation can all contribute to vagal healing. Movement therapies that specifically support vagal function can be incredibly healing for people with nerve damage. Gentle, rhythmic movements like yoga, tai chi, or walking in nature can stimulate vagal pathways while also supporting overall nervous system integration and healing. Professional support is often crucial for addressing vagus nerve damage, particularly when it's related to trauma or has been ongoing for extended periods. Healthcare providers who understand nervous system function, functional medicine practitioners, and trauma-informed therapists can provide comprehensive approaches that address both the physical and psychological aspects of vagal damage. The timeline for vagus nerve healing varies significantly depending on the extent of damage and the underlying causes, but many people begin noticing improvements within weeks to months of consistent treatment. Early signs might include slightly better sleep, reduced anxiety episodes, improved digestive function, or increased tolerance for social interaction. Deeper healing typically unfolds over months to years and often involves gradual restoration of capacities that may have been lost for extended periods. People often describe the process as coming back to life, rediscovering their ability to feel joy, to connect with others, to feel safe in their own bodies, and to engage meaningfully with their lives. The long-term vision of healing from vagus nerve damage goes beyond just eliminating anxiety and depression symptoms. The goal is restoring your nervous system's natural capacity for regulation, resilience, and connection. Many people emerge from this healing process with greater self-awareness, stronger boundaries, deeper relationships, and more authentic ways of living that honor their nervous system's needs. Understanding anxiety and depression as potential manifestations of vagus nerve damage doesn't diminish the very real suffering these conditions cause, nor does it suggest that all mental health symptoms are purely physical, but it does provide a different lens for understanding persistent, treatment-resistant symptoms and opens up new possibilities for healing. Your anxiety and depression may not be character flaws, genetic destiny, or permanent brain disorders. They may be your nervous system's way of communicating that a crucial regulatory system has been damaged and needs specific support to heal. Your vagus nerve has incredible capacity for repair and regeneration when given the right conditions and interventions. The journey of healing from vagus nerve damage often involves rediscovering capacities you may have forgotten you ever had. The ability to feel deeply calm, to experience spontaneous joy, to connect authentically with others, and to feel fundamentally safe and at ease in your own life. This isn't just recovery. It's often a profound awakening to your nervous system's natural capacity for well-being and resilience.